Explore today's must-have trends and innovative styles at Mrs. B's Clearance and Outlet. Shop one-of-a-kind finds in today's must-have trends. Explore wall-to-wall deals, furniture, flooring, mattresses, home accents, seasonal favorites, and more. Discover unique new home decor, pillows, accessories, and more. There's something perfect for your style and budget. There's new inventory every day at up to 80% off suggested retail. Discover the style and savings of Mrs. B's Clearance and Outlet.
Welcome to another edition of Chargers Unleashed. Jake Hefner and Dan Wolkenstein here with you from the LA Football Network. This is your first time tuning in to the show. Make sure to hit that like and subscribe button on YouTube. You can also follow us on Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, Spotify, and Apple Podcasts. And if you are tuning in on ESPN Radio, thank you so much for joining us. Dan Wolkenstein, we are just over 3 weeks out from the beginning of Chargers training camp down at their new facility, the Bolt, down in El Segundo. And as we gear up, because football just needs to return already, still lots of storylines to sift through. Dan and I decided, after weaving through a lot of the positions, we've gone through the draft picks, we've gone on players that are on the hot seat, make or break season. Now, as we're getting closer to the season, let's kind of put it all together and let's talk about some realistic expectations for Jim Harbaugh and the Los Angeles Chargers in year one. How are the Chargers going to contend in the AFC West, specifically when you're going up against the two-time reigning Super Bowl champion Kansas City Chiefs? Dan Wolkenstein, how are you, sir?
I'm well, thank you. Other than the fact that there really isn't much Chargers content or things for us to cover for this Chargers team, so we're all kind of going through slim pickings, finding things to discuss. And thankfully for us and for our listeners, we have an interesting article, a timely one, by Maurice Moton from Bleacher Report, going over the top storylines that will determine the winner of each of the NFL divisions for 2024. And wouldn't you know it, the title of it for the AFC West, Can Jim Harbaugh quick fix the Chargers too? Which got us thinking, are the Chargers, are they AFC West title contenders? We'll get into that and all that and more. But first, Jake, how are you? Then let's pay the bills.
I'm doing just fine, Dan. The drolls of the NFL season are wearing on me. You may not be able to tell it in my voice, but there is a excited football individual that is just ready to let loose. Training camps are right around the corner, followed by the preseason, followed by the regular season. Football needs to come back, please.
But by the sounds of your voice, I have a feeling at least one of us is going to be the pessimist in this episode.
I wonder who that would be. Dan Wolkenstein, trying to tap into the 2023 version of myself that has been dormant for a few months. This should be fun.
Yes. But Jake, before we get to that, let's pay the bill. Let's talk about our friends.
I want to remind everybody that BetOnline is your number one source for all of your sports betting needs this season. From baseball, golf, soccer, right up to the top fights in the UFC, MMA, and boxing. Every stat, every matchup, and even live odds and spreads while the games are being played. When the game's over, head on over to our online casino and get in on the game of blackjack or poker, or unwind with one of our over 150 slot games that we have available. Head on over to the website today. That's betonline.ag to get in on the action. Use the promo code BELIEVE, that's BLEAV, for your 50% free bet credit on your first deposit for up to $250. BetOnline, the game starts here.
So, I mentioned it before, Maurice Moton, July 1st article. So this was just yesterday. Came out with an article, top storylines that will determine the winner of each NFL division for the 2024 season. And Jake, let me get to the AFC West here. And wouldn't you know it, the AFC West biggest storyline, like I mentioned before, can Jim Harbaugh quick fix the Chargers too? And he went on to kind of highlight the history of the Los Angeles Chargers now with head coach Jim Harbaugh, what Jim Harbaugh's done in the past with previous teams, this team winning pretty quickly after Jim Harbaugh comes in, talks about the Pro Bowl players or Pro Bowl caliber players on this team, including Khalil Mack, Joey Bosa, Derwin James, even highlights Denzel Perryman in there. Talked about Rashawn Slater, as well as Joe Alt being selected number 5. Talked about the receivers and that being a question mark, that they were able to go ahead and kind of fill a major void with the departure of Keenan Allen and with Mike Williams. Gave a big emphasis in the run game from one Greg Roman offensive coordinator, as well as Gus Edwards, J.K. Dobbins tandem. But at the end of it, he says the Chargers offense has question marks with Alt moving to the right side and big cleats to fill at wide receiver. Yet Harbaugh's track record suggests that this team could be the biggest threat to the Kansas City Chiefs in the AFC West this year. So that got us thinking. But Jake, before we get into today's topic, I do want to highlight our sponsor, friends over at Rock Solid Sports Memorabilia, who actually just had a crazy signing event down in San Diego, and had the likes of Dan Fouts, and had Charlie Joyner, had Lorenzo Neal, had all kinds of folk down there. Tuli Tupelotu, Asante Samuel Jr., all in San Diego. Huge event. They're doing another one, actually, and this time it's going to be a fundraiser down in San Diego. Saw the Chargers down in San Diego over at Camp Pendleton. That continues here, and I want to kind of give a quick preview for this. We saw it. We posted about it on Twitter today, but I want to kind of give a quick overview here. They're doing a fundraiser backpack giveaway. So it's going to be on July 21st in San Diego. You can go to our Twitter handle at LAC_unleashed to get the details. But Alohi Gilman, Rashawn Slater, Cornelius Johnson, old school, by the way, Quentin Jammer will be there as well, doing a bunch of signings. And what Rock Solid Sports Memorabilia is going to be doing for the fundraiser, every signature or item purchased for this event, which you can actually go there live, or you can mail things in. Again, details are on the link. But for everything purchased, 2 backpacks will be donated to a child full of school supplies for this upcoming school year. So huge event. It's going to be kind of a tailgate block party type thing down in San Diego at the beach in Mission Beach. Jake and I will be there. Go do a good deed. Go get some swag. We can help with the fundraiser. We'll be doing a giveaway here in a bit to kind of help promote this thing a little bit more, but want to get folks details. Again, if you have any questions about it, DM us, question us in the chat, and we'll go ahead and get you more information. But Jake, without further ado, let's go ahead and get started with today's episode. Are the Chargers AFC West contenders? We'll talk about that next on Chargers Unleashed. Should the Chargers be viewed, in your opinion, as AFC West title contenders?
That's
and when we go through this, right, I think there's a few lenses to look into. One is perspective. Look at the history and what that tells you, which that doesn't look great. Then we can go through some of like the big rocks of what's most important in determining that: coaches, coordinators, players, and schedule. So, Jake, what does history tell us?
History tells us no, this is not going to happen at all. You go back to the last 20 matchups that the Chargers have had versus the Kansas City Chiefs, and this is dating all the way back to 2014. The last 20 matchups, the Chargers are 3-17 against the Kansas City Chiefs. The Kansas City Chiefs has just absolutely dominated this division. They are going for their 9th consecutive AFC West title. They are vying for that three-peat of the Super Bowl, the first time that's ever happened. And they have done it on the backs of Patrick Mahomes. They have done it on the backs of Andy Reid. And the crazy thing about this, Dan, is that you're talking about Patrick Mahomes, who came off of some of his worst regular season stats that he has had since he's been in the NFL. Worst regular season record he's ever had in the NFL during his time in the NFL so far. The stats were not there. The weapons didn't show up as consistently as we have seen them in previous years. So what did they have to lean on last year by the time that they got in the Super Bowl and in the playoffs? It was their defense, Dan. So now you're talking about a team that's just rounding out to be more complete and tougher to beat, whether we're talking about at Arrowhead Stadium or on the road. And they are constantly retooling, improving in certain positions, and everybody's trying to figure out when is that time going to come where the Kansas City Chiefs are going to stumble and they're going to be knocked off their proverbial perch. And Dan, I mean, I hate to say it, this is a Chargers podcast. And I know that we're going to get heavy into this, but there are a lot of, much like this article says, there are a lot of question marks as it relates to the Chargers. And Jim Harbaugh, as we have said repeatedly on this show, has won everywhere that he has been. And the expectations for him to rebuild this team into a contending team in the AFC is obviously, looks like it started off on the right foot thus far with the staff that he's created, with the way that this team has been put together by him and general manager Joe Ortiz. But now it's time for the results, because you and I have been doing this show now for a while. And we've been together. We've been together through the Anthony Lynn days. We've been together through the Brandon Staley days. And we have had similar conversations like this. And I don't want to have that same conversation again for it just to come out to be empty words. So I will not come on this show today to tell you, that the sky is red. I'm not going to tell you that today.
Or the sky is red. The sky is red for Kansas City red.
Yes, that is true. I'm not going to blow the proverbial smoke, if you get what I'm saying. This is going to be a big challenge for the Chargers. The goal for Jim Harbaugh is to get them back to being playoff contenders, which is something they have not been for a while. And however you want to set that barometer for yourself, I think that's a realistic expectation for Jim Harbaugh in his first year as the Chargers head coach. As we delve into this, Dan, and we've talked about it plenty of times on the show, there are still a lot of question marks as it relates to this roster in terms of things that need to get done, along with the coaching staff that still will be in a little bit of a, learn as you go collaboration with the team, trying to get everybody where they need to be by a certain point in the year.
So a lot there, but let's kind of kick it off, I guess. So first things first, the question was, can Jim Harbaugh quick fix this Chargers team to be the threat to the Chiefs? So let's just one piece at a time. So Raiders, Chiefs, Broncos, Chargers. Are we in agreement that Chargers at worst should be second best in the AFC West? I.e., are the Raiders and Broncos worse than the Chargers? Do you believe that they will end up being worse than them?
End of the day, yes. I like what Antonio Pierce is doing with the Raiders. I think that he's taking them in a good direction. It's almost ironic considering that these were two teams that were vying for the services of Jim Harbaugh after the national championship game. But I think that you're going to see the Raiders just eventually, step by step, they're going to become harder to beat. Divisional opponents, and even against the Raiders, they're still tough. They could be finished winning 2 games a year, and if one of them was against the Chargers, it would not matter to them. These are games that these two teams get up for, and they play hard for. And one of the individuals that you have on the screen there really loves playing against the Chargers because he's had a good track record, and I'm talking about one Max Crosby.
And big reason why the Chargers went out and went offensive tackle at number 5. Max Crosby, meet Joe Alt and or Rashawn Slater. For the Raiders, in my opinion, they got a pretty darn good tight end room. I'm not sure about the running backs, the wide receivers. I mean, they got arguably the best one in the NFL. Offensive line, train wreck, in my opinion. Secondary, no clue what they're doing. That secondary looks like it needs some help. If you have a bad offensive line in this division or in this conference, that usually doesn't spell well. So bad offensive line plus question marks in the running game plus secondary question marks.
Sounds like the Chargers issues from last year.
Sound familiar? Exactly. Then you go to the Broncos, and I think it's an easy one. Like, that team seems to be kind of at a fire sale. Jerry Jeudy not there. Justin Simmons not there. Bo Nix is supposedly going to be their quarterback, or maybe Zach Wilson. Who knows? A lot of question marks there. So, in my opinion, I think both of us agree, Chargers at least 2. But like you said, Jake, did you say 3-17?
3-17 in the last 20 games.
If we were to average that out, that's 1.5 wins for every 10 attempts.
And realistically, you could scratch one of those games because I'm talking about January 3rd of 2021 when Kansas City Chiefs at that point in time were
Backups.
resting their starters. So it's like
So 2-18.
It looks even worse.
realistically.
Yeah, it really looks even worse.
Whoa. But we've talked about the reasons, and you've kind of earmarked the head coaches, the general manager for the Chargers team, and we've all talked about the pitfalls of this team and the reasons that they have been less than contenders at the end of the day. So at least two. And so before we get into can they be AFC West contenders, let's look at some of the big rocks of what signifies that. So let's start off with the coaches, right? If we were to go head to head here, again, we're not going to sit here and put rose-colored glasses through this, although some might try. People can say they want what they want about Jim Harbaugh, and we're all excited about Jim Harbaugh. But Andy Reid's a different story, right? Andy Reid might be the best offensive mind in football, paired with, oh, by the way, Patrick Mahomes. But what I think is important here is many would say this has been the biggest disadvantage for the Chargers, has been the coaching comparison. And that has been one of the reasons why the Chargers consistently fall to the Chiefs, is because at the end of the day, coaching matters and the team hasn't been coached up. So what I would say is it's a lot closer now. Would you agree?
I would agree with that.
So from a coaching perspective, how much stock do we have in Jim Harbaugh and company? Jim Harbaugh, Jesse Minter, we'll talk about in a second, Greg Roman, Ryan Ficken. How much confidence do we have in the coaching staff being a determining factor in them winning or potentially winning or contending with AFC West? Is that a confidence or is that a deterrent? I would imagine it's a confidence, right?
It's
that gives you
definitely
reason to believe.
It's definitely a confidence. You measure it 1-to-1 ratio here. There is no question on who you give the advantage to as a head coach between Andy Reid and Jim Harbaugh as it stands right now. Everybody will obviously point to Jim Harbaugh being out of the league for 10 years and him having to reacclimate and obviously, gear this entire group together, both player and coach, personnel coaches alike, in order to generate a winning formula. Now, do I think that he can go out there and do that? Yes, I believe that that's been his goal from day one. But if you're measuring it against Andy Reid, it's still a tough mountain to climb. But to your point, Dan, it gets a little bit closer. One of the biggest X factors that we have talked about repeatedly, more specifically during the Brandon Staley era, has been coaching. And whether it was a combination of Brandon Staley's defense with Joe Lombardi's offense that was there for 2 years, or if it was Brandon Staley's defense with Kellen Moore's offense, the game planning, the adaptation from one half to the next, the proverbial plan that the Chargers would come out to a game with and go on to execute that just wouldn't end up coming to fruition, or when someone would have, more importantly, when someone would have a counter for that plan, the Chargers just would not know how to react. Now you bring on Jim Harbaugh. Now you bring on Greg Roman, who Jim Harbaugh has plenty of familiarity with from his days in San Francisco. Now you bring on Jesse Minter, who obviously Jim Harbaugh has a lot of familiarity with, just coming off winning a national title with Michigan. And you have positional coaches that are littered on both sides of the ball that Jim Harbaugh has had familiarity with. I think that from the ground up, this system is being built in the image of Jim Harbaugh and the team that he wants to create and run. So what does that mean? That Justin Herbert's going to go back to being a game manager? No, I think he knows exactly what he's got with Justin Herbert and the howitzer that he possesses. But the point is, how are you able to get him to use it in a much more balanced way? How many times would you like to see this Chargers team milk the clock for the final 7 minutes of a game, which, if we're talking specifically about the Chiefs, That's how other teams have been able to do it. Control the clock, keep Patrick Mahomes off the field, run the ball, especially turning it over to the opposite side of the ball. The defense has been one of the biggest hindrances of Justin Herbert's career since he has been in the league. And now you take one of the youngest defensive minds in the game, in Jesse Minter, bringing him up for the college ranks, giving him the title of defensive coordinator for the Chargers.
And solely defensive coordinator.
Yes, having him build out this staff with this team, which, again, as far as personnel goes, there's still a lot of questions here. But if there's one thing in terms of what Dan's talking about as far as confidence goes, it's already been proven from the standpoint that Jesse Minter has been able to adapt in certain situations, as I've said repeatedly, and as defensive line coach Mike Elston has talked about. He says that Jesse Minter is the best situational defensive mind that he has gotten a chance to coach with. And Mike Elston's been coaching in the league now, or just in football for the past 27 years. So he's been around a while, and that's quite something to say about Jesse Minter at this part of his young career. So the confidence level, Dan, has to be up. But does it come par to the Chiefs? I kind of hate to use that old term that Patrick Mahomes said when he was walking on the green during that golf tournament.
Knew you were going there.
You believe it when you see it. You want an optimistic year for the Chargers, and we've essentially said this any of the last 3 years, is you split 1-1. That's optimism. Going 2-0 against them is damn near an impossibility. But most of the time, as it's related for the Chargers these past several years, you go 0-2.
For those of you on ESPN Radio, you can listen to this full episode on YouTube and anywhere you get your podcasts, Apple, Spotify, you name it. Thank you so much for tuning in. Jake, let's continue. So again, I think there's a two major components, right? There's the head-to-head thing, and then there's just strength. There's just looking at the schedule, right? Chargers have a much easier schedule this year than they have in years past. And just from a schedule win-loss record, can they take the crown? And in our schedule release, we went through our kind of predictions for the team. I have them going optimistically 11-6 or 10-7. That's kind of like the realm of where I have. I believe you were similar, right?
I was similar. I think there was one game that separated us.
I think we were between 10-7, 11-6. And do we think that can win the AFC West? I don't think so. Unless the Chiefs take a step back. And do we honestly think they're going to take a massive step back? Last year, they were supposed to take a massive step back.
Last year was their step back.
And their defense went AWOL and absolutely torched the NFL. But what I think is important here is the Chargers have closed that gap. And it's you hate the glass half full silver linings stuff when the Chargers face the Chiefs. The proverbial, you hear the quotes all the time. Oh, they play them so tough and they match up so well against them. And then they lose 17 of 20. So realistically, you don't. If you lose that many, I don't care if it's all by 1 point, you're losing everything. That's the constant. That's the theme. The theme is you're not close. The theme is you lose almost every time you play. A lot of that, and I think what has made this kind of a juicy question, in my opinion, is realistically, the coaching staff has been the biggest reason for that. I think all of us would agree on kind of the big rocks of why the Chargers have not been AFC West contenders, right? And it's easy. There's a lot of low-hanging fruit, right? There's one, coaching, situational play calling, inability to adapt. Defense has been nothing like it should be. Injuries have been an issue. They can't run the ball, can't protect Justin Herbert. That's kind of it from a high-level perspective. And then Tom Telesco and the roster management and not being deep enough and all that, it all kind of comes to fruition to become a team that is decimated and loses 12 games last year. But I think this team has real belief from the top down and real buy-in from the top down. And so the question was, again, in the article, can Jim Harbaugh quick fix the Chargers too? I think the answer to that is yes. But what is quick fix? Does that mean AFC West contender? I'm not there. I can't honestly sit here and say that I think the Chargers can take on the defending champs and win the AFC West at 10 or 11 games. I just don't see it. And I mean, I could be the homer and be like, oh yeah, they're for sure going to win. Again, remember the schedule. The losses I have are at the Steelers, against the Chiefs, at the Browns, home against the Bengals and Ravens, and then losing to the Raiders, and then the Chiefs again. And that's 10-7. If we're talking, I have the Raiders splitting. I have the Broncos. You have them beating the Broncos twice. I've got them losing to the Chiefs once, but then Ravens, Bengals. Can you say confidently you're going to beat either of those teams? I can't. Browns, I can't confidently say they're going to beat them. Steelers, can't confidently say I'm going to beat them. So what's been the Chiefs' record the last 3 years? Could 10-7 win the AFC West? Hell no. Not even close.
No.
And
the quickest way that I've always said to get to the playoffs is you win your divisional games. And the Chargers have been unable to find a winning record in their division for a long time. And with Jim Harbaugh, obviously, that's going to nullify different things, obviously, as Dan said, as in terms of change, belief, buy-in, which we've already heard and talked about these players saying. There is a different feeling that you have seen in the last few months of Jim Harbaugh entering the Chargers facility and what he has been responsible for and had to do in terms of rebuilding this coaching staff, rebuilding this roster, draft process, whittle it down to what OTAs and minicamp has been like. The vibe has been completely different. You hear players talking differently about what this training camp or what these OTAs and minicamp and offseason have felt like thus far. There was some openness from players in terms of where they made mistakes in years prior, in terms of where they should have been. Dan and I refuse to say that phrase on paper anymore. We've had enough of it. We know that the fan base has had enough of hearing it. This is why you had to go out and get a guy like Jim Harbaugh, because results have eluded the Chargers for too long. You need to get results on Sundays, and that's what it's about.
So again, can Jim Harbaugh quick fix the Chargers? I think the answer to that is yes. And I think a quick fix going from 5-win team to a playoff berth, that sounds like a quick fix. That's a success in my opinion. And again, this is a deep hole that this staff came into. Staff being GM and coaching staff, looking at the roster, what they had to kind of fix to get to where they're at now. Playoff berth, I would say, is a quick fix. That's a win. And realistic expectations for year one, going from a 5-win team, adding 5 or 6 wins in one season. Now, again, 5 wins. You lost your quarterback for the last month of the season. You were decimated with a lot of injuries, but still, that's a quick fix.
Hey, you've seen it happen with these teams that can have quick turnarounds. Look at the Houston Texans where they were 2 years ago. And look at
the biggest reasons why they turn around. I think that's kind of
there you go.
The big piece.
How about coaching being a big one of them? Rookie stud quarterback. Another one.
Or just quarterback who's healthy.
It is possible. It can be done. But in terms of success, Dan, I would actually kick it up a notch further, not just playoff berth. I would say you've got to get one W in the playoffs. I think that has to
be the divisional round.
Yes, I think that has to be your barometer as it stands right now.
So let's say that's the quick fix. So if we put the bar at playoff win, can they do that? Are you expecting that?
If you told me that the Chargers could enter the playoffs with a 10-7 record and get a playoff win in that scenario, I would say, hey, that's a great start in year one of Jim Harbaugh's coaching career for the Chargers.
But will they? That's what I'm asking. Do you think they can?
I believe that they can, yes. Now, you get to the playoffs without being able to predict, obviously, who's going to be there. The AFC is still stacked with contenders of teams. It's not like Dan and I can just stand here and say it, rub the magic lamp, and it's going to take place. This is obviously going to take a lot of work between now and by the time that we get to January. But at the same token, yes, I believe that it is possible. Are there going to be some pitfalls along the way? Yes. Would you love to see the Chargers go out there and dominate every Sunday? Of course you would, but let's just stay in reality here for a second. I think there is going to be some pitfall times. There's going to be some growing pains between whether it's situational coaching or if it's players. You're going to have those bad days.
Yep.
But it's more so that I have a belief in this coaching staff that if this team suffers a loss, that they're going to be able to rebound in a great way the following week. And that's going to be the difference. That's going to be the difference to me, Dan.
So let me ask you this in a different way. For the Chargers to be a playoff winning team, who, aside from Jim Harbaugh, because I think let's just take him off the table, what person, that could be personnel or player, would you say would be the biggest determining factor in that turnaround, aside from Jim Harbaugh?
It's funny. Ask me today, you could get a different answer than what I would possibly tell you tomorrow. There's a reason why you went out and you paid Ben Herbert a lot of money and gave him a press conference when he arrived with the team.
Okay.
We know that dreaded word that, again, we don't like saying on this show. It starts with an I, that he was solely brought in to fix. But I think you look at it, Dan, and those stats against Justin Herbert, given what his defense has given him over the last 4 years since he's been in the league, you got to say it's Jesse Minter.
Okay. I thought you were going to say Ben Herbert. Okay.
Minter. Ask me tomorrow and maybe Ben Herbert today. I'm saying it's Jesse Minter.
Yeah, you took my answer.
Sorry.
No, that's okay. I think, it's unfortunate what happened with the Chargers these last 3 years, and it's low hanging fruit to just bash on the previous coaching staff. And, I do think that Brandon Staley tried doing everything himself, and I think sometimes just took on too much water, and it obviously didn't work out. And he didn't listen to the people around him. He didn't bring in the right people to help support him. And instead of just being able to focus on the defense or focus on something, he focused on everything. There is something to having a bona fide elite defensive coordinator that you can bring in to still just be the defensive coordinator when you have a head coach like Jim Harbaugh. For example, like if Brandon Staley came to the Chargers previously and went from DC of the Rams to DC of the Chargers, I think that would have gone better for him and his defense than what we ended up seeing. But we're already seeing some differences in this defense and what they're talking about and how they're learning and how they're applying what they're learning, what the players are saying about being adaptable and what the coaching staff is talking about and the success and track record of Jesse Minter. and the players and coaching staff that have come along with him, right? All the praise and the teaching aspects and all of that, right? I dare this Chargers team to have even just an average defense. Give Justin and this offense an average defense, 15th. I'm not even asking for top 10 right now. We know the stats.
Average would do the job.
We know how good Justin Herbert is when he has the defense give less than, what was it, like 20 something points? He's like 22-6 or something crazy. And he's having to win these shootouts. We talked about it before. I am so bullish on Jesse Minter. And that was the most important hire, I thought, of any coach that was brought in after Jim Harbaugh. And say what you will about the question marks that we've alluded to for the secondary. You know, again, I think they were 30th in passing yards allowed last year. I think it was 17th in rushing yards. Like, they got torched in the secondary. And I don't know if
defense. And
I don't know if you can say that this passing defense roster-wise is better than last year right now. You lost Mike Davis. I'm not saying Mike Davis was great, but who'd you bring in? Who was better last year, Mikey Davis or Christian Fulton? If you're just going off last year, again, we're looking at different reasons for all of it, but there's a lot of stock you're putting in this coaching staff. But we've said this, coaching matters. And can you do more with less? Or can you do more with the same? And I do think that this coaching staff can get more out of these players.
When we had Sean Merriman on this show just last month, he was rattling off the point differential record that was in a 5-game span that the Chargers lost 5 games by, what was it, 3 points or less last year?
I think they're like 1-7 in those games last year.
And he just said, you don't think that Jim Harbaugh can give you 5 of those games back and put them in the win column instead of the loss column?
Right there. That's 10-7, by the way.
It's the biggest X factor that has eluded the Chargers since, realistically, Marty Schottenheimer. Everybody could say, oh, yeah, Norv Turner took him to the AFC. Let's be real. Norv Turner inherited the team that Marty Schottenheimer was building. Marty
ran circles around Norv. Let's be real here.
Yes. Great playoff.
He got fired after 14-2, by the way.
It forged a great legacy for Phillip Rivers playing in that AFC Championship game with his torn ACL. It was awesome, even in a loss. But you haven't had a vibe like this since the days of Marty Ball. It just feels different from a coaching perspective. And that's the one thing that the Chargers have been chasing.
So like realistically, right? And maybe this is a topic for another day, but in short, do you think that the roster 1-52, when it's all said and done, will be better this year than last year?
1-52, I couldn't accurately say that, Dan. I could say that I believe that there are certain position groups that will definitely be stronger than last year.
Well, what I'm asking is this team better? Is the talent better or worse than last year overall?
There's arguments on both sides of the ball. I think if you the way to make a good argument for this is that I think the Chargers, in terms of, obviously, time permits, we haven't seen it actually played on the field yet, but I think you have a coach that knows exactly what he wants to do with this team. The Chargers have gone back and forth between Joe Lombardi's offense. They've brought in Kellen Moore to try to replace that and be more efficient and go downfield. That didn't end up happening. I think Jim Harbaugh knows exactly what he wants to do with this team. They know their identity. Both sides of the ball. And I think it's going to create more consistency, more efficiency. It's going to make Justin Herbert a better quarterback in the long run. How about not playing Superman every game? How about not having to rely on Justin Herbert making a 30-yard bomb just to get them back into the game? Having a defense that's going to come in, play fast, physical, disciplined defense, know exactly what they want to do. Yeah, even with a young nucleus, that you have on both sides of the ball, I think that they're going to come in with an identity of what they want to do. Because of that, I think that's the aspect where you could say that even with the Keenan Allens and the Mike Williams under previous regimes, you could say that collectively, this team is going to know what it wants to do better than they have over the past 3 years. It just feels different.
So I think what I'm getting at, and let me just draw this string for a second. You say we're not going to discuss this team as, on paper anymore. Because for years we've talked about, on paper, this team is arguably, the best roster in the NFL or whatever. We've seen all those stories and articles and everyone comparing, and like they haven't even been close to the best team in the NFL. I mean, I wouldn't even say they've been close to top 10 in the NFL, let alone the best. So talent hasn't been the reason, at least we thought, top end wise, right? Like it's always been, to me, it's less about top end talent, but if you average the talent across the board, how good is that team? And to me, like it's been heavily skewed both roster wise and salary wise to the top. And if those guys go down, it goes sideways. I would say, generally speaking, I think the top end talent on this team, if you were to average it out, it's probably less, mainly because of guys like Keenan Allen, Mike Williams, not there anymore. Say what you feel about Austin Eckler. Like he was still a good player, right? Wasn't what the Chargers needed, but I think he's still a good player. So I think top end wise, I'm not sure. Older Khalil Mack, Joey Bosa come back off an injury, who knows? But average, you look at the depth of the team. Like I think, in short, I think the average of this team is probably better, maybe a little bit better, but I think it's close. If you average 1 to 52, top to bottom, right? Look at the depth of the linebacker room, for example. Look at the depth of the edge group, for example. Look at the depth of wide receiver. Instead of just going 1 through 2, go 1 through 5, 1 through 6. So if that's roughly the same, right? And we had this team prior to the season as like a playoff team until the collapse of last year. The coaching difference, I think that one is like a big advantage to 2024 Chargers.
Huge. Dan, Michael Lombardi touched on this very subject a couple weeks ago when he was on the Pat McAfee show in terms of what Jim Harbaugh is going to create with this team. And as you said, for the longest time, we'd hear it from the national media. We'd hear it from everybody. Oh, the Chargers are one of the most talented teams in the NFL. And at some points, it was strong enough to where you could go to any position group and you could say, yes, yes, yes. They're right up there with their personnel in the top of that particular position group. Mike Lombardi has a different philosophy on this because this is what he said. It's not about being the most talented team. It's about being the most connected team. And he said, that is what Jim Harbaugh is going to instill in this roster. We haven't mentioned him much, but Joe Ortiz has done exactly what he said he's going to do in terms of building this depth up from this roster, both in free agency moves and in the draft. I think they have made their team deeper. And Dan, as you mentioned, coaching is going to elevate a lot. And whether we're talking about veterans that have been in this league for 10 plus years, or we're talking about guys that are coming into their first season, coaching is going to elevate a lot with the personnel that you have on this team. And that's going to be the difference. That's going to be the difference.
Yeah, we can get into the specifics, right? Which we don't need to. We've done it before. But what Jesse Minter means in terms of the style of coaching, the style of defense, the type of defense, his staff he has beneath him, right? The emphasis of Jim Harbaugh and Greg Roman and what this receiving group is looking like now. And, that balanced attack that everyone's kind of talked about and protecting Justin Herbert, and, the tip of the spear and the fists and all of that stuff from Jim Harbaugh, the offensive line, and the focus they put in free agency and building the underbelly of the roster, right? Joe Alt was a big signal of what was important to this team. Signing guys like Bud Dupree, like that's a difference. That edge group looks great right now. Having Junior Colson kind of probably, if not man the middle of the defense and the entire defense, be one of those guys. There's a lot that is in the Chargers' favor that points to why this coaching staff can bring this team into a quick fix, right? They're not, I would be shocked, but I will be so happy to be wrong if the Chargers win the AFC West. But do I think that is a realistic expectation in year one? I think the Chargers players and staff might tell you yes. But should fans believe that right now? Like, I can't honestly say that I can expect this team to beat the Super Bowl defending champs in their own division until I see it. Like you said, and what did he say? Like, I'll see it when I believe it.
He said it
I
backwards.
Wrong.
He said it backwards, but
I'm saying it backwards too, because look, say what you will about Patrick Mahomes, the guy is absolute nails.
It's hard to bet on him, especially after what you saw from especially after what you saw from him and this team overcome last season. It's hard.
But hey, if there is a coach to do it,
stranger things have happened.
Not with the Chargers.
No. Definitely not with this franchise.
I would love for that strange thing to happen, right? It'd be so strange for the Chargers when AFC West.
I would love for a 2007 New York Giants type of a situation where you take on the Goliath of the 17-0 Patriots. Obviously, that's a Super Bowl situation. And the Giants getting into the playoffs, even with a 10-6 record that year. I would love for a situation like that to play out for the Chargers. But if we look at it like this, again, this is year one for Jim Harbaugh. I think if you could tell me and play Nostradamus and tell me that January comes and the Chargers get in the playoffs, win a playoff game, even at winning a playoff game after what the Chargers have suffered over the past several years, I'll take that in year one for Jim Harbaugh. You're on your way. I have full confidence in what he's going to be able to continually build with this team along with Joe Ortiz for the future. So you may say that my expectations are severely low, and I get that. And hey, for everybody that wants to, pound the 2025 Super Bowl drum for the Chargers, please do it, and do it loudly and do it proudly. But
so
it's hard to find the road to get there as it stands right now.
Yeah. So you and I have the Chargers going 10-7, 11-6, somewhere in that frame. Okay. Real quick, for those of you watching and you're still listening, shout out to you, by the way, because I know this time of year there's not much going on. But Jake, real quick, this is the Chiefs schedule for 2024. Would 10-7, 11-6 be an AFC West title? Okay. Real quick. Week 1 against the Ravens, win or loss for the Chiefs.
Oh, sorry. The way that this looked for a second, I thought it was starting the pitch. I'm like, oh, no, that's preseason. My bad. It's a toss-up. Honestly, it's a toss-up.
Let's say first toss-up. Let's call it a win.
I'll probably, week 1 at Arrowhead, you always have to go with the Chiefs when they're at Arrowhead, essentially.
Okay, there's one win. Week 2, Raiders.
Yeah.
Win. Week 3, at Browns.
Yeah.
3 wins. Week 4, at Falcons.
Mm-hmm.
4 wins. Week 5, versus Bengals. Let's call this one a loss.
I'll call this one a loss. This is probably where they suffered their first loss.
Okay, week 6 at the Broncos.
You call it a win.
Win. Week 7, the Chargers.
Depends on what Chargers team shows up. Honestly, optimistically, you always just say as it stands right now that you would hope to split with the Chiefs.
Okay, so let's say this one. Let's get optimistic. Do the Chargers win?
Okay.
Chiefs lose. So 5 wins currently
at the Chargers. So okay, you give them the benefit of the doubt.
Okay, so that's 5 wins. Going to week 8, first Bucks.
Chiefs win that game.
That's 6 wins. And the bye. at the Panthers.
They have 2 byes, so the Chiefs will win that game as well.
Okay, so that's 7 at Bills. Again, we could be optimistic and say they lose this. I don't care.
I know
Go ahead.
that, but it's just like I can't even be optimistic about this game to toss it up and say it. And now essentially Josh Allen has less weapons offensively than he had last year. And now there's question marks surrounding his wide receivers. So
let's just say they lose this one.
Even at Buffalo, I feel
this is what I'm getting at.
I know, but I feel for Bills fans who have had to suffer over the past couple of years. And I'm sorry, not with that roster as it stands right now. And not even in Buffalo. I can't trust that.
But let's just go with that for a second. And let's say they lose this. Still 7 wins. Week 12 versus the Saints.
They win that.
8 wins. Week 13 at the Steelers.
They win that.
9 wins. Week 14 versus the Chargers. They already lost to the Chargers.
They still split because this one's at home for them.
10 wins. Mm-hmm. That's 10. Already at 10, by the way. Week 15 at the Raiders.
Yeah, they'll take that one too.
Okay, 11. Week 16 versus the Texans.
This is, God, I would love to see CJ Stroud get this game.
That'd be fun.
That would be great to watch. And it's in Houston.
Mm-hmm.
I say it again though. It's hard to bet against Andy Reid and Patrick Mahomes.
So 12 wins.
Mm-hmm.
Week 17 at the Niners.
God, the Niners are going to be pissed off.
Yeah,
and it's
lost
at home. I say they're going to grab this game.
Okay, so that's 12 still.
And you finish out the season against the Broncos. You get another win.
So that's 13 wins. So, again, we were being kind of optimistic here for Chargers fans as to what path leads to the Chargers getting an AFC West possibility. They got to get to 13 wins. Do you see that happening? Is there?
I don't. Even somewhere in there, Dan, I'm sure that one of those Chiefs games is going to be like a surprise loss because there's always one of those every year. Like, remember the opening game last year? Everybody thought that the league was just gifting the Chiefs an opening game win. And then look what happened.
Yep.
So one of those games is going to be a surprise, and it's going to end up in a different column for them. So record-wise notwithstanding, you're still probably hovering between 13 and 11 wins for the Chiefs. I unfortunately, I just don't see the Chargers being able to get there. No. Realistically, the Chiefs would have to take a similar nosedive to what happened to them last year. And the fact that they still went on to win the Super Bowl with everything that they had going against them last year.
Unfair.
They are not going to allow that to happen again.
No. And again, you look at the Chargers schedule, like, I don't know how you're going to get to 13. Hell, even 12 is tough. And that was the low end of what this Chargers team was looking at, or the Chiefs team was looking at. So maybe in this, if we're talking real here, we're both pessimistic. No, I don't think that this Chargers team is an AFC West contender in year 1 in 2024.
I mean, title contender.
AFC West title contender. Correct. Yeah. But playoff berth, playoff win. Totally. I can see that. Anything else? I know this is a long one. We kind of went through different angles here. We went through the coaching side, went through the AFC West as a whole. We went through the Chargers' history with the Chiefs. We went through kind of a head-to-head type thing as well as a schedule. Again, I don't want this to sound like we're being doom and gloom about the Chargers because that's not really what this is. But I think it's more just setting realistic expectations about what this team could and could not be.
I don't think it's being pessimistic at all, Dan. People can surely construe it that way. There's obviously a saying out there that comes for overcoming expectations. Let's have that. I'm all for being proven wrong. I've said that many times on this show. I love being proven wrong because it means that the Chargers did something good in that circumstance. So By all means, prove me wrong every chance that you get, Chargers.
Please prove us wrong, Chargers. We would love to come on here and use this as like the old takes exposed handle and just go back and play a goofy clown song as we're talking about how stupid we look when the Chargers are hoisting the AFC West crown. Like, yeah, please. See when I believe it. Jake, we did it. Somehow got to 50 plus minutes on an episode in July. We're like, what, 3 weeks, 2 weeks, a little over 2 weeks away.
3 weeks.
Is it the 16th and the 23rd? I think those are the two. 16th
Technically, for that, but if we're talking about open training camp.
Okay, yes.
Yes, we're just over 3 weeks away.
Yes. Let's end this one. Anything going on for the 4th? Low-key? Easy?
Yeah. A good libation is all I need.
Good libations. That sounds like a good remix to Good Vibrations. For Jake Hefner, I'm Dan Wolkenstein. This has been Chargers Unleashed. We'll talk to you next time on Chargers Unleashed. Happy 4th of July, everybody.
Explore today's must-have trends and innovative styles at Mrs. B's Clearance and Outlet. Shop one-of-a-kind finds in today's must-have trends. Explore wall-to-wall deals, furniture, flooring, mattresses, home accents, seasonal favorites, and more. Discover unique new home decor, pillows, accessories, and more. There's something perfect for your style and budget. There's new inventory every day at up to 80% off suggested retail. Discover the style and savings of Mrs. B's Clearance and Outlet.